Hey sixth grade, this is Miss Franklin again, and this is our third video. So today we're going to look at how we can use real life information to create a graph. So what you're going to need for this lesson is some markers or colors, or you can use a pen or pencil, some type of candy. I use M&Ms, and you'll see why in a second, and a piece of paper. So go get those things, and we're going to get started. So in front of me, I have a piece of paper, some colored markers, and some M&Ms. If you notice, my colored markers correspond to the color of M&Ms we have. And then I also used 4 of the fun size packs of M&Ms. So they're pretty small, so that's why I used 4 of them. So now what we need to do is sort our M&Ms based on color. So now I have my M&Ms sorted, and if you notice, I also numbered how many of each color we had. On my paper, I drew a circle, and it takes up about most of my paper. And this type of graph we're going to make is a pie chart. So pie charts are a little unique because they have percentages. So we have to figure out how to get our numbers of M&Ms into a percentage. So let's think back to what we learned earlier in the year. We know a percentage is always written out of 100. So just keep that in the back of your mind. To figure this out, what we need to do is now add up and figure out how many total M&Ms we have. So let's do that. Let's start with 11 and 9 to give us 20. 20 plus 5 gives us 25. So we've done those. Now let's look at the green ones. 25 plus 6 would be 31. 31 plus 7, 38. And then 38 and 12 for the orange would give us 50. So we know we have 50 total M&Ms. So if we were to write these as fractions now, we would have 11 out of 50, 9 out of 50, 6 out of 50, 7 out of 50, 5 out of 50, and 12 out of 50. So I'm going to come over here to my paper and write those down. So now I've rewritten my fractions, and I have 11 out of 50, and I know a percentage is always written out of 100. So I need to figure out how I went from 50 to 100. Was there anything I can multiply times 50 to get 100? Well, I know 50 times 2 is 100. So when I'm making equivalent fractions, which is what I'm doing, if I multiply the denominator by 2, I also have to multiply the numerator by 2. So 11 times 2 would give me 22. So for each denominator, it's all out of 50. So each time, I'm going to multiply my numerator and denominator times 2. Okay, so I have rewritten all my equivalent fractions now. So I multiplied both my numerator and denominator times 2 on every fraction to get a denominator of 100. And we did that because we know percentages are written out of 100. So I went ahead and wrote those to the side. So 22 out of 100 would be 22%. 24 out of 100, 24%. And same with all the way down with the next few fractions. Now we're going to take these percentages and think about how we can put those in our pie chart. So I label my pie chart Fun Math with M&Ms. And we know a graph, and this is a graph, has to have a title so we know what's going on in it. Now we need to think about how we can get these percentages into this graph. So we'll say the whole thing is 100%. Okay? The whole graph is 100%. It's a complete circle, 100%. But I have to make 22% from this whole circle. So if I were to take it and cut it in half, I just cut my circle down the middle. If I know the whole is 100, half of it is going to be 50%. So if I were to cut it in half, it would be 50. So pretend we have an imaginary line going down our circle this way. Now I want to take that half, those two halves, and cut them in half again sideways. So a whole is 100, half of it is 50. Now I want to half the 50%. And if I were to half 50 or divide by 2, I would be left with 25%. So think about 4 quarters make $1. Imagine 4 sections being in this circle. So if we look back at our fractions, we have closer to 25 percentages. than we do 50 or 100. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to look for the circle or the percentage that is close to 25. And I see 22, 10, 18, 14, 12, but then I see 24. So that's very close to 25%. So it's going to be almost 1/4 or 1/4 of this circle. So we're going to fill that in now. So I filled in the orange part of my circle because I was representing my orange M&Ms. If you also noticed, I made some folds in my circle. So I took it and I folded it in half so you can kind of see the outline. That makes 50% or half of our circle. So then I also folded it in half again. So that makes 1/4 of our circle, or 25%, which is half of 50. Oops. Next, go back to our paper and let's look at whatever's closest to 25 again. So we've already used 24. So I'm going to put a check by that. And the next one I have is 22%. So 24 was almost a full 1/4 of a circle, almost 1/4 of it. You can see that the fold line right here, it's a little above that. Well, 22 is smaller than 24, so my blue portion of my circle is going to be a little bit smaller than my orange portion of my circle. So I'm going to come over here to the second fourth. I've already used one of them. And I'm going to draw my line a little bit smaller. So it's going to go up a little bit more and leave a little more space here to represent 22% with the blue. Now I've finished my blue M&Ms, and that's 22%. If you see that the 22 I drew is smaller than the 24% because 22 is smaller than 24. So now let's think about what color we're going to do next. I checked off the blue because we have used it. Now I have 10%, 18, 14, and 12. So out of these, I know the brown M&Ms are going to be the smallest because that's 10%, and 18 is going to be the largest. These numbers I have left are not as friendly as 22 and 24, so I'm going to have to use some critical thinking skills to think about how I want to graph these. We said that half of our circle would be 50%, and 1/4 of our circle would be 25%. If I were to split this 1/4 in half again, so pretend I took this 25% and I just cut it in half. Half of 25 would be 12.5. So if I come over here, do I have any numbers that are close to 12.5? And I see, well, most of my numbers are, but I have this 12% down here. So I'm going to use that next. And if we look over here, I've already used a tiny bit of, or I have a tiny bit of this first circle, this first 1/4 left. So if I were to cut it in half, it would be about right there. But since I have a little bit left over, I'm going to cut it a little less than half to make 12%. And I'm doing that to represent my green M&Ms. So I represented the green with 12%. And if you see, I used the little part of this that was left over, and it's not exactly in half, so it's a little bit smaller since we had this little spot up here left over. So I came back to my paper and I checked off 12 because I was done with it. So now I want to see if there's anything that I could add to 12 that gets me close to 25 to make up the rest of this 1/4 of circle. So I used a little less than 12%, so I have a little more than 13% left over because 12 and 13 give me 25. So do I have any of these numbers close to 13? Well, I see 10, 18, and 14. So it makes sense now to use 14%. So the rest of this circle, you can see where the fold is, the rest of this 1/4. This is going to be my yellow portion, which is going to represent 14%. Now I have my 14% in my circle, and I'm left with two percentages, 10 and 18. So obviously 18 is going to be the bigger percentage because it's a larger number. So I have this much of my circle left. If we were to add these together, it would be 28% because 10 plus 18 is 28. Over here, I have a whole circle, which is 25%, a whole 1/4, which is 25%. and then 3% left of my other quarter of my circle because I've already used 22% percentage of it for the blue. So since we have 18, I've already used 14, and I know that 14 was a little more than half of that quarter of circle. So over here, I'm going to do the same with 18. I'm going to make it start at half, and I'm just going to make it a little bit larger because I know 18 is larger than 14. I finished my 18%, and now I only have one portion of my circle left, and that portion is going to represent 10%. So I need to make sure that this portion of my circle is smaller than 12% because 10 is smaller than 12. So it looks like it is, and it's not going to be perfect every time. I would recommend doing this in pencil first, so if you do need to erase, you can. So I'm going to represent the 10% in this last portion of my circle. I finished recording the 10% M&Ms, which is the brown M&Ms, on my pie chart. So now the next step is to make sure that all of our parts of this pie chart add up to be 100%. So I'm going to take 24 and 22 and add those together to get 46. 46 plus 10 gives me 56. I don't want to look at the 18 and 12 yet. Instead, I want to add the 14%. So 56 plus 14 would give me 70. And then 12 plus 18 is 30. So 70 plus 30 gives me 100. So my circle does add up to 100%. So I did that part correctly. A couple of reminders before you do this. So remember, a percentage is always written out of 100. So you're going to have to make equivalent fractions to get to that 100%. Also, a pie chart is made to be equal to 100%. So you're going to have to use those fractions to get you to that 100%. You can also use any candy. You can use Skittles, M&Ms, of course, anything colored like gummy bears. And the best part of this is you get to eat it when you're finished. Just a reminder, you can access at-home learning activities through the Webster Parish School Board portal. I look forward to seeing what you've done, and if you do this, please send me a picture through Remind. I look forward to hearing from you.